Ever find yourself staring into your closet and like wondering where all these clothes even came from, or like how the shirt you're wearing right now, how that impacts the entire planet? Well, get this. The European textile industry, they have like 1.3 million employees, and they're trying to answer those very questions. So today, we're going to dive into their vision for the future, which they've laid out in this thing called the Eurotex 2024 Manifesto.
It's really interesting, this document. It's like almost like a wish list, you know, but also a strategic plan all in one. And they really go head on into these big issues that this industry is facing.
Okay, so set the scene for us. Like right now, what's the state of the European textile world?
Well, we're talking about a huge industry. I mean, massive. 192,000 companies, something like that. And they generate 167 billion every year. But, you know, it's not all, sunshine and rainbows and sustainable threads. They're dealing with globalization, obviously, environmental concerns, a ton of competition. That's where this manifesto comes in. It's kind of their roadmap. But it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving in the next few years.
And it seems like they're not mincing words. Like they come right out and say 80% of policies that impact these companies are decided by the EU.
Exactly, yeah. They're making it clear this isn't just about, textiles. It's about recognizing how much power the EU has and how that power even impacts like what we're wearing. What they want is to work with policymakers, have a real partnership. And the goal, to build an industry that's both globally competitive and sustainable.
So less like, please help us, and more like, we deserve a seat at the table, right? Where all the decisions are being made.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the most important things they talk about is free and fair trade. Especially with, these big players like the US and China. They want trade deals that are balanced, that don't put European companies at a disadvantage. And we're talking about things like regulations, costs, even just getting access to markets. What they want is a level playing field.
And speaking of level playing field, they don't hold back on some of the challenges they're facing closer to home, do they?
Absolutely not. No, they're very specific about the problems with all the bureaucracy, all the paperwork. And they say we need smarter regulations, especially for the smaller businesses. And get this, they have this idea. They call it a competitiveness test, and it would apply to any new law. So imagine before they pass a new law, they'd have to think about how it would impact businesses.
Now that is an idea I can get behind. Less paperwork for everyone. But it's not all about like cutting costs and red tape, right? This Eurotex 2024 manifesto, they really get into sustainability too.
Right, and they should. They're calling for like economic realism when it comes to being sustainable. So it's about finding that balance where being environmentally responsible doesn't completely wreck you economically. They even say, and this is a bold statement, that making a sustainable garment could actually be 4 times more profitable.
Wait, 4 times?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, it goes against everything you hear about sustainable fashion always being more expensive.
I know, right? And that's what makes it so interesting. Is it actually possible? And if so, what's stopping them from making these profits? Is it about being more innovative? Do they need help from the government? Or do consumers need to completely change how they shop? It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what if helping the planet could actually help businesses too? This manifesto is really pushing us to, rethink some things.
It definitely changes how you see that whole eco-friendly equals expensive idea.
Mm-hmm.
But how do they actually plan on making these sustainable profits happen? They can't just be like a hope and a dream, right?
Right. They get into the details. They have this whole thing about a smart industrial strategy, and it's about way more than just like calling something green.
Okay, so in reality, what does this smart strategy actually look like? How do they do it?
Well, they give policymakers 8 specific recommendations, almost like a to-do list to make the European textile industry more competitive.
Give us the good stuff. What are some of the big ones?
One of the most important is dealing with the energy crisis. They say that these crazy high energy costs, it puts European companies at a real disadvantage, especially compared to like manufacturers in Asia.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cheaper energy means they can make things more cheaply too.
Exactly. And it's not just about making energy cheaper, it's about helping the industry itself use less energy, become more efficient. So less reliance on fossil fuels, more investment in renewables. They see that as key, not just for the environment, but for their bottom line too.
So it's like playing the long game, right?
Yeah.
Investing now in solutions that will help them and the planet years down the road.
Exactly. And here's another interesting thing they focus on: nearshoring.
Nearshoring, just remind everyone, what was that again?
So basically, it means making clothes closer to home, geographically. So instead of depending so much on factories in Asia, they want to work more with countries that are closer to Europe, places like around the southern Mediterranean.
So not about cutting off global trade completely, but more about, like, not putting all their eggs in one basket, having different options.
Exactly. It's about being more strategic with their supply chains. That way, you have lower transportation costs, less impact on the environment, and maybe even fewer of those political headaches that come with relying too much on one part of the world.
Right, right. So they're trying to make the industry as a whole more adaptable, more resilient. What about the people, though? The workers? Do they talk about fair labor practices, working conditions, all of that?
Oh, absolutely. They have a whole section on what they call a fair and skilled workforce. They want to invest in training programs, education, the things that will attract new people to the industry. They also talk a lot about the importance of decent working conditions across the entire supply chain. And I mean, everything from literally the cotton fields to the factory floor.
It's not just about the clothes being sustainable, then. It's about the jobs being sustainable, too.
Exactly. And that's where the consumer comes in, they say. They argue that to really make this work, we need to move away from fast fashion, That whole cycle of cheap, disposable clothes. They want people to buy higher quality pieces, things that last longer, that they'll actually want to wear for years, not just throw away after a couple of washes.
That's a big ask, though, isn't it? I mean, fast fashion is everywhere, but they're not just saying, oh, it's the consumer's fault, are they?
No, not at all. They know that shoppers need more information, more transparency to make good choices. Like they want better labeling, stricter standards for anything that claims to be sustainable. That way people can actually tell what's really eco-friendly and what's just, marketing. They even suggest things like lower taxes for sustainable products to kind of give businesses and shoppers a nudge in the right direction.
Interesting. So using, like, the financial side to push the market towards sustainability.
Exactly. But they also talk about the need for education, the campaigns to help people understand, like, what impact their choices really have. They even say we should be teaching about sustainable fashion in schools.
Wow. They are really thinking ahead. But, I mean, it makes sense. If you want to change a whole industry, you got to start with the people buying the products.
Right. And this brings up another really important part of their plan, tackling this whole problem of greenwashing.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Making something sound way more environmentally friendly than it actually is.
Yep, exactly. And they say this greenwashing, it's not just that it tricks people, it also hurts the companies who are really trying to do the right thing. What they want is stricter rules, tougher penalties for companies that make false environmental claims.
So accountability is key then.
Absolutely. They want a system where sustainability is rewarded, not just used as a marketing tactic.
It's like they're saying, okay, everyone needs to get on board with this. Businesses, people buying stuff, the people making the rules, like everyone working together to make sustainability just, the norm, not something special.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And that idea of everyone having to do their part, it runs through this whole document. They even go as far as saying we need a global textile strategy because their point is European companies can't fix everything on their own. This is a global industry with global challenges. Other countries need to step up too.
So it's less about like Europe is the best and more about like, let's all work together on this.
Exactly. They want everyone to agree on things like environmental rules, labor standards. The goal is a level playing field, so that way you don't have companies just moving their factories to countries with weaker rules. It's about raising the bar for everyone.
Pretty ambitious, don't you think? But then it makes you wonder, like, how do they actually think they're going to pull this off? This is huge.
Well, they see the EU as having a big role in this. Like, they can use their influence, their power to make changes on a global level. They even suggest having a special EU textile envoy. So someone who's like their representative speaking up for the industry in international stuff. It's about being proactive, right? Not just waiting for things to happen.
So they want the EU to be like the world leader in sustainable textiles.
Yeah.
Setting an example that other countries will follow.
Exactly. They believe that if the EU sets the standards really high for sustainability, it'll actually encourage innovation, make them more competitive. It's about turning a challenge, like the environment, into an opportunity to get ahead.
So instead of being afraid of regulations, they're saying, bring them on. We can handle it.
Pretty much. But they're also very clear about making sure those regulations are actually effective. Not just a bunch of complicated rules that make it harder for businesses to do. Well, business. And that comes back to what they were saying before about making sure policies are more coordinated within the EU itself.
It's like they're saying, get your act together, EU.
Well, they're a bit nicer about it, but they do make it very clear that different departments, the ones dealing with trade, environment, industry, all of that, need to work together better. They say the current system is too messy, which leads to policies that contradict each other. And obviously, that just makes things more complicated for businesses.
So less paperwork, more support for innovation and sustainability, right? That's the idea.
Exactly. And get this, they even suggest having one person in charge of all of it. Like a single vice president or commissioner for European competitiveness who'd be responsible for making sure all these different areas are working together. I mean, it's a big change, but it shows how serious they are about making things work better for the European textile industry.
A lot to think about. But if they manage to do even half of it, it could really change the game. Not just for textiles, but for other industries too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this manifesto, it's about so much more than just clothes. It's about rethinking our whole economy, our relationship with the planet. They're talking about creating a future that's more sustainable, more equitable, where what we wear actually reflects our values, our commitment to a healthier planet.
So next time you're looking through your closet, remember this conversation. That t-shirt you're holding, it's not just a t-shirt. It represents the choices we're making. As consumers, as citizens of the world, really.
And every choice we make, it all adds up. It all shapes the future of this industry and ultimately the future of our planet.
And on that note, we come to the end of our deep dive into the Euratex 2024 manifesto. We've explored their vision for a more competitive, sustainable, and globally responsible European textile industry. What stood out to you? What will you do differently the next time you're shopping for clothes? Someone to think about. Until next time.